Hello. Today's Torah portion is Bamidbar. It is the very beginning of the book of Numbers, the first few chapters in the book of Numbers. And I'd like to focus on a very small situation here that we learn about in chapter 3, verse 11. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, "Thereby take the Levites from among the Israelites in place of all the firstborn. The first issue of the womb among the Israelites, the Levite shall be mine. For every firstborn is mine at the time that I smote every firstborn in the land of Egypt. I consecrated every firstborn in Israel, man and beast, to myself to be mine, the Lord's." Okay, what this actually is saying is that until this point in time, it is the firstborn that fill a special function of serving God. But from this point on, they will be replaced by the Levites. Okay, and what we have here, though, is why God had the firstborn to begin with. And ever since, and we see this actually in Exodus, in a number of places when God is giving the instruction with regard to the Exodus, when he's giving the instruction of who's doing what, and in the middle of all of the instructions about the Exodus, we have in Exodus chapter 13, the Lord spoke further to Moses, saying, "Consecrate to me every firstborn, man and beast, the first issue of every womb among the Israelites is mine." And this, of course, goes back to something else at the very, very beginning of the book of Exodus, when we have God first selecting Moses and telling him, what his job is going to be, and what he's explaining to what he's supposed to say to Pharaoh. He says as follows. He says, this is chapter 4, verse 22. "Then you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says the Lord, Israel is my firstborn son." So we have a very interesting parallel here. God in Egypt struck the firstborn of Pharaoh. God says the nation of Israel is my firstborn, and therefore the firstborn of every family in Israel are consecrated to serve God in a very special way. That all changes here in chapter 3 of Numbers. But what has remained with regard to the firstborn is the fact that they have to be redeemed in some way. There's a redemption ceremony that goes on here, and in Jewish tradition from that time on, every firstborn is redeemed. And in fact, there's a ceremony that takes place when a baby is born, who's the firstborn, a baby boy who's the firstborn of any mother. Then there's a ceremony of 30 days where there's a priest, literally a Kohen, a priest, a descendant of Aaron, who then has this transaction where the parents give 5 silver pieces to the priest, and the priest then redeems the firstborn from being consecrated in that special way to God. The question, of course, arises here is why? What happened? Why is it that the Levites have this new job, and that it's taken away from the firstborn? Okay, so our commentaries, especially Rashi, notes as follows. If you go back to the sin of the golden calf, you'll notice that Moses, coming down from Mount Sinai, seeing the nation worshiping the golden calf, he's of course very, very upset. And what does he say? This is Exodus chapter 32, verse 26. "Moses stood up in the gate of the camp and said, 'Whoever is for the Lord, come here.' And all the Levites rallied to him." In other words, when he called out, everybody's in a frenzy in front of the golden calf, and he calls out, "Who is for the Lord?" It was the people from the tribe of Levite that immediately came to him, which of course are his relatives, his closest relatives. But it is very clear from this statement that the Levites did not participate in this, idol worship. They stayed loyal to God. And therefore, the explanation is here. God is saying the people who most deserve and are most appropriate for serving me in the temple, in the tabernacle, and fulfilling this special role, this is going to be the tribe of Levite. rather than the firstborn. But I always also think it's very interesting to note what was the practical effect of all of this. Because once you had Levite in this special role, as we learn as we go further on in the Bible, Levites, for example, are not given a territory, a physical territory. They're given certain cities, and they are actually the whole tribe is set aside for a particular job. They are given cities dispersed around the nation of Israel, but they are not of any of the other tribes. If a firstborn is serving God or doing this or performing this role, what the Levites ended up performing, every family in Israel, or certainly every extended family in Israel, has a firstborn. And so what you've done is you've gone from a situation where every family has somebody there that is serving God to a situation where only a particular tribe, and in all the other families, you don't have anybody that is in this position. So it is quite a transformation that takes place here. I'm thinking, though, that one of the reasons, therefore, that the Levites could not have its own land is because in choosing the Levites, at the same time, God wanted to at least have a part of what could have been with the firstborns within the Levites. And instead of giving them their own territory, by putting them in cities all over the country, he ended up dispersing them all over and there wouldn't have been a tribe then that didn't have some Levites or some Levite cities in their midst. And in that way, then God has accomplished a bit of what could have been accomplished had the firstborn remained in that so-called Levite position, or that special position of service. This has been a few words of Bible from the heart of biblical Israel. Shabbat Shalom.